Bienvenidos al episodio 48 de Sin pelos en el cactus. El día de hoy tenemos a un invitado especial. Es el Dr. Christopher Palmer. Él es un psiquiatra en Harvard, autor del libro Brain Energy o Energía Cerebral. Y él es un psiquiatra, un pionero en la implementación de lo que viene siendo el estilo de vida y la alimentación, entre ellos dietas cetogénicas, bajas en carbohidrato y ayuno intermitente, para mejorar problemas como depresión, ansiedad, esquizofrenia, bipolaridad. Ustedes lo dicen. Y es algo sumamente interesante, creo que motivante, les puede levantar el ánimo a muchas personas, ya sea familiares o amigos, que pues estén batallando con estas condiciones, porque de repente los medicamentos no los están en realidad sanando, están manejando, como lo hemos platicado previamente, de su condición. Pero aquí vemos ejemplos, vemos evidencia, vemos estudios en donde su estilo de vida puede ayudarle incluso a personas con esquizofrenia, por ejemplo, como lo va a platicar ahorita el Dr. Palmer. Puede ayudar hasta quitar y poner en remisión esta enfermedad. El episodio va a estar en inglés, pero yo lo considero algo tan importante que les voy a hacer un resumen, un PDF, en donde voy a poner el link de donde lo pueden bajar en YouTube. Entonces se van a YouTube, se los voy a hacer un resumen en inglés y les voy a hacer un resumen en español. Generalmente estos resúmenes de cada episodio se los doy a los suscriptores en Instagram de MedHacker, así es como estoy ahí. Pero ahorita esto es algo que para mí es tan importante porque considero que hay una pandemia de enfermedades mentales y hay que mejorar esa salud mental, así que considérenlo como un regalito y les voy a tener ahí ese PDF. Y empezamos.
Everyone, I know that usually this podcast is in Spanish. Today it's going to be in English, but don't worry, we're going to give you subtitles. And it is a tremendous honor, pleasure to have Dr. Christopher Palmer. He is a psychiatrist, and he is very well known for his approach that he is having, like a lot of the invites we've had here, for groundbreaking work in the field of mental health. Dr. Palmer is the author of Brain Energy, and here he presents a novel and integrative theory that connects the mental illness such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, to metabolic dysfunction at a cellular level. We're going to be speaking a little bit about this, and a little bit about him. Dr. Palmer has a medical degree from Washington University School of Medicine, and then completed his residency in psychiatry at McLean Hospital, which is affiliated with Harvard Medical School. And I really want him here because I feel that he can be a ray of hope for the tremendous cases that I'm seeing as cardiologist for anxiety, depression, and many of these patients you're being managed just with medication. And he has a tremendous knowledge that I am very sure that this episode is going to help a lot of people. And it's going to help you question if what you have been doing all along is the best thing for you. So, Chris, tremendous pleasure to have you here, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Christian.
So, one of the things that I wanted to start is that I think a lot of the people that we've had here have initiated this journey on on improving their life because they noticed, or we noticed, that there was something not right with how we were doing things, And that was my case. At some point in time, I was doing my no fat, my cereal at night, and I was trying to lose weight. Chronic migraines, I felt miserable. I was doing everything that I thought was right for me. And I started questioning, is this just age, Is this, is it downhill from here? And that's when I tried something different. And when I started reading your book and hearing your experience, I've made a lot of connections. And I think, for me, I think your experience and more with your background is very powerful because it will motivate people to understand that there's different reasons why they should change their lifestyle. So I think that that is a great place to start at. And what made you? I mean, you're in psychiatry. You're give us a little bit about your background. I mean, as I know, it started early on, even at med school. But let's get the people to know you a little in that aspect.
So, my background is unlike what most people would think. I'm a white Harvard psychiatrist. So most people think I grew up in some rich family and went to private boarding school or something like that. But that was not me, unfortunately. Um, uh, so I grew up in a pretty middle class family in Indiana. When I was a kid, I had my own struggles with mental illness. I had OCD. Um, uh, I went through kind of a series of events, with my mom and her family. And my mom ended up, when I was about 12 years old, having a nervous breakdown. And she actually became severely depressed and suicidal. And then she developed a psychotic disorder. Um, she and I went to live with her for a little while to just try to help her. And she and I ended up homeless for a while. And, I ended up getting so furious with the mental health field. More because she was going to all these mental health professionals and getting help and taking pills and doing talk therapy, and nothing was working. And she ended up living the rest of her life with a psychotic disorder. She never really got better. And I will say that I ended up choosing to go into mental health and psychiatry because of that. That is like the main reason. Like I said, I have my own experiences and I'm happy to go into that. I'm kind of an open book, but I don't want to go on and on for hours. But the main reason I became a psychiatrist was because I saw that my mom's life was devastated and the mental health professionals couldn't help her. And I just assumed they were really incompetent, arrogant jerks. And so I ended up, going to medical school, and then I did really well there. And then I end up at Harvard Medical School doing my internship and residency. And, through all of that, I still kind of struggled with low grade mental health symptoms, OCD, mild depression. Um, and when I was in my residency, I ended up getting diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. So, prediabetes, high blood pressure, really horrible lipids, sky high triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, high LDL cholesterol. Everything was bad. Um, and I kept trying a low fat diet. I kept trying. I was exercising regularly, and technically wasn't overweight. So I was doing everything right by the book. Like I was doing everything they kept asking me to do, and everything kept getting worse. My blood pressure just kept going higher and higher. My blood sugars are going higher and higher. And at some point, the doctor, for a couple of years, the doctor's like, "Oh, you need to go on medicine. You need to go on medicine." And I kept telling him, "No, I'll do even more of a low fat diet." And and eventually he's like, "You're really gonna have to go on medicine now." And I said, "Give me a few months. I'm gonna try something different." And I end up trying basically a low carb ketogenic diet, which was called the Atkins diet at that point. And within 3 months, not only did my metabolic syndrome go away, but my mental health got dramatically better. And I was dumbfounded. I had no idea that what I was eating could play any role with my really lifelong OCD and depression. I had no idea. I just thought I was depressed for all of the usual reasons. My life sucks. Um, whatever. Uh, and so that ended up leading to this long journey of where I'm at now. But that's kind of how it all started for me.
And I mean, this is one of the things that I want people to really understand, that the way that he decided to change his life, it is an ongoing thing that we see with different testimonies from physicians, that we just don't get why we don't get better when we're following certain recommendations. We've had here Jason Fung, Dr. David Ungwin, we've got Dr. Baiter Jaramillo, I mean, from different nationalities and whatever. And we all have a common denominator, and it's usually us. So what I'm trying to tell you is, when you try to modify something for the good with your lifestyle, yes, but here the thing is, it's going to impact on your cardiovascular. It's going to be affecting your kidneys, your mind. One of the things that you talk about is OCD. I had migraines since I was 12. I'm a problem child, ADD, ADHD, and whatever. And med school was tough. I mean, I can tell you with that was tough. And when I started doing this, when I started questioning, and I just like you, I went low carb. In 3 months, I lost about 25 pounds, which was ridiculous for me. And my migraines went away. My migraines went away. I mean, I was injecting Toradol in my IV, and I mean, I was just popping it there. I've got a scar of how much I needed because nothing worked. It was a pain in the ass. And when I started seeing this, then I started checking my labs. Then I started doing this, and then at some point in time, when I was doing so great and my labs looked fantastic, I could not believe it. It's when patients started asking, "Is like, what the hell are you doing?" And for me, this was my key point, my key moment, in which a patient actually got pissed at me because I told him what I was doing. And he's like, "You asshole." It's like, you tell me to do completely the opposite of what you're doing. And there you are improving. And I'm here stuck in the same thing. And I'm doing exactly. I mean, he didn't mean it in a bad way. I mean, it's like I have a great relationship with my patients. But that was something that for me really is like, there's something here. And when you started seeing it with different people, it's different doctors. And I think it takes a bit. We have to question things. And sometimes questioning in the medical realm, we start, I mean, getting, some attacks from people. But I think this for me is extremely important because many people that have either depression or anxiety, and then they have palpitations, and then they have metabolic syndrome, and we start going with cognitive disorders. We start going with insulin resistance, and insulin resistance, it's different mechanisms, which in my field, it develops atherosclerosis, it develops hypertension. But I think this could be a point in which we start going into the brain energy situation. I mean, it's like, what's going on with the brain? Because now we're seeing, for example, we've got, I read material from Richard Isaacson, Dale Bredesen, and then we've got Lee No with Mitochondria and Future of Medicine. And we start seeing like a new thing that I don't think anybody of us was taught in med school. And then we start hearing Alzheimer's as a type 3 diabetes and all these things. And you start actually getting into this from the mental issue. Is like, is there an issue with energy in the brain? And then you start actually going into, well, I mean, I guess this could be a bridge to mitophagy, autophagy, or whatever. So basically what I'm trying to point out here is do mental diagnosis. I mean, is this from a brain perspective, insufficient or excessive energy, or, I mean, what's going on here? And from your standpoint and from what you've seen and read and observed.
So I actually think that I think maybe a good place to start is that there are usual mental health struggles that all of us as humans have. So if you lose a loved one, if you fail a test, if something bad happens to you, if some, animal's chasing you, or if your boss is being mean to you all the time, you're going to have depression, anxiety, PTSD symptoms, other things. And those are all normal. Those are not brain disorders. Those are normal. And sometimes we call that mental illness or mental health struggles or whatever. And then I think there's another category of mental disorders where the brain is actually malfunctioning. The brain is not optimally functioning, and people can have panic attacks for no reason, or anxiety for no reason, or chronic unrelenting depression, or more serious symptoms like delusions, hallucinations, other things. And what I'm arguing is that when you look at the decades and decades of research that we have now accumulated, whether it's genetic research or neurotransmitter research or hormone research or neuroimaging research, cell biology research, when you look at it, we can finally start to put it together. And the way that it fits together, the only way that it fits together, is to say that mental disorders, brain disorders that we call mental illness, are in fact metabolic disorders affecting the brain. So when metabolism is dysregulated or dysfunctional, the brain can become malfunctioning or dysfunctional, and that can result in all of the different symptoms that we call mental illness.
You say, metabolic or dysfunction in the metabolism. And I think from what we're seeing, and we start seeing, I was looking at stats. I don't know if we're just being more, I don't know, everybody's getting a diagnosis of, I guess, different psychiatric or psychological diagnosis. We see a trend and it says autism is increasing, depression is increasing, anxiety in the last couple of years. Okay, you can call it from the COVID-19 pandemic or whatever, but we also see obesity increasing. And one of the key factors that I've seen over time is the impact of inflammation and the theory of inflammation affecting everything. Inflammation is going to be affecting the heart because it's going to increase, it's going to provoke vulnerable plaque. You're going to have an increased incidence of strokes, heart attacks, non-STEMIs. The same thing will apply for nephrology. You increase inflammation, more nephritic syndrome, everything that ends up in itis. I've seen this from the rheumatological aspect, perspective, and everything. And is there, I did some research in the past regarding IL-6 and inflammatory cytokines. Now we know that obesity is completely related, as the adipose tissue becomes an inflammatory origin of many of these cytokines. Before you're anti-inflammatory, now you become pro-inflammatory. And once you start following the paths of inflammation in every organ, you start seeing how every specialty is trying to deal at least with some aspect of what the inflammation might be a culprit or might be just an added variable. But do you see this? Is there a particular relationship maybe with obesity, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, increased inflammation, and what has to do with your patients when you're treating them in different pathologies? Is there anything that you see there?
So it's a really important question, and it gets confusing to a lot of people because some of the medications that we prescribe actually cause all of that. So some of the medications that we prescribe in psychiatry cause weight gain and obesity. Some of those same medications can cause insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Those same medications can increase all of your risk factors for cardiovascular disease, including increasing inflammation. And so some people in our field think, well, those are just side effects of the treatment. Other people think that it's just everything you described, Christian, is just laziness. It's laziness and gluttony. If everybody would just stop eating so much, put down the fork, just put down the food, just eat everything in moderation, control your calories. If you just control your calories, you won't have any of that stuff. And then when they talk to me, they're like, well, Chris, all of your patients with mental illness are just lazy slobs. They don't really come out and say it that harshly, but that's really what they mean, is that your patients are just lazy and they're undisciplined. And maybe it's because of their illness, but whatever. If they just put the food down, everything would be fine. So you can't say that mental illness is related to anything. What I'm saying is that no, actually, folks, even long before the pills were created, even in the 1800s, researchers knew about this. The connections between mental illness and insulin resistance and obesity and inflammation, all of these things, like they didn't know all that in the 1800s because we didn't know about all that. But over time, over the last couple hundred years, we have slowly but surely gathered tremendous evidence base that even before people get their first psychiatric medication, the first pill that anybody gives them, they already often have signs of insulin resistance or higher levels of inflammation even before they get diagnosed. So we've just had 2 major studies that have followed thousands of children from birth to age 24. And age 9 seems to be particularly problematic. The kids who are 9 years old and have the highest levels of insulin resistance have a 5-fold increased risk. That's 500% increased risk for having a psychotic disorder or being at risk for a psychotic disorder by the time they turn 24. There are no genes that increase risk that much. Insulin resistance increases risk that much. And then another research study found very similar findings for high levels of inflammation. Children with high levels of inflammation, even though they don't have a mental illness yet, they just have high levels of inflammation. Years later, when they turn 18 or something, then they develop their bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or chronic depression or anxiety disorder or whatever. So we know in some people, it doesn't always happen that way. So not everybody with a mental illness has high levels of insulin resistance ahead of time.
Mhm.
It's like a feedback loop. Mental health problems can lead to high levels of inflammation and insulin resistance, but insulin resistance and inflammation can lead to mental illness, and you just end up in this vicious cycle where you're stuck, you're trapped. And the great news that you and I have experienced firsthand is that you can do something about it. You can stop that vicious cycle. If we start identifying this in children, we might be able to prevent bipolar disorder. We might be able to prevent an episode of schizophrenia. We might be able to help people avoid these catastrophic mental illnesses.
And this, people, is exactly what I'm talking about. I think that that just gives me chills. It's hope. I think many people need that right now because I see the patients. I mean, as a cardiologist, sometimes I feel I'm doing the job of a psychologist, and it's their stress, being judged, being told. I mean, I know when I speak with a patient, because when you know the patient, you will know that many of them are doing tremendous effort and following some of the recommendations that they just simply suck. And it's following the recommendations so strictly that sometimes has put them in a worse situation, even in a place where they're doing hypocaloric diets because they were recommended, and that basically brought down the metabolism. They feel like crap. They're losing hair. They're gaining weight when they breathe. I mean, yeah, I'm being a little bit sarcastic here, but that's what ends up happening. And for me, this is extremely interesting. And when we go back, usually I don't think nobody or anybody goes back in time to look at studies from 1950s, 1930s. There was one, I believe, from 1930 that I stumbled upon, in which studies that there's no way they would be approved right now, but they were getting dogs, and they were, for example, putting an infusion of insulin in one leg and normal saline in another, and they did it for a couple of weeks. And what we found, well, what they found, I'm sorry, is that the leg that actually had the insulin infusion developed atherosclerosis. I mean, you've got calcified plaque. I mean, you start developing plaque in these legs just in a couple of weeks compared to the other one, which brings me to a point in the cardiology standpoint in which we have hyperinsulinemia. You have hyperinsulinemia. Insulin has when it's insulin resistance or high insulin, then the body starts making more, and you start developing 4 different mechanisms that you're going to have high blood pressure. So you've endothelin 1 and nitric oxide that goes down. You've got smooth muscle cell proliferation, and you even get receptors in the kidneys are absorbing more sodium now secondary to these receptors. And these patients then end up getting more insulin, and then it becomes a pain in the butt trying to control their blood pressure. So when I started looking at this and the inflammation and the impact, I mean, I can identify how it is in the heart that we develop these problems. Have you come up in a way in which insulin is affecting directly the brain? And because we'll get it to a point in which we start, or with some of the patients, I remember that you mentioned one, and I think he had a schizophrenia, if I'm not mistaken. And damn, I mean, it was a beautiful experience that I'll get to it. But what's the mechanism there? Do we know? Do you know? Do you suspect?
So, I mean, the mechanisms there are lots of mechanisms because metabolism is super complicated. And so it involves a wide range of hormones. It involves, neurotransmitters, inflammatory cytokines, all sorts of things, the gut microbiome. But to your question about insulin, does insulin play a role in the brain or brain health? There is no doubt. So for the last 20 years, this field has exploded. And something that a lot of people don't know, they usually think of insulin as it relates to diabetes. And they think that's it. And some people kind of know that insulin comes from your pancreas, and that's what insulin is. It comes from your pancreas, and it relates to diabetes. Well, shocking news over the last couple decades, insulin is actually produced in the human brain as well. And it is a signaling molecule in the human brain. And it probably actually is playing a critical role in the release of insulin from the pancreas. And so when you eat food, so that's kind of the whole type 3 diabetes for Alzheimer's, is that they seem to have insulin resistance in their brain, and therefore they have glucose hypometabolism, or inadequate or insufficient metabolism producing enough ATP. So people with Alzheimer's disease have insulin resistance and have lower metabolism than they should, glucose hypometabolism. And that basically means that their brain is struggling to work. And at the same time that it's struggling to work, it's also struggling to maintain itself and kind of clean out the waste products and other stuff. And so over time, it becomes a progressive illness because it just doesn't have enough energy, if you will, to function properly. Well, that exact same thing is seen in people with schizophrenia. That exact same thing in different brain regions is seen in people with chronic depression or OCD or anxiety disorders. So depending on what part of your brain or parts of your brain are impacted, you may end up having different symptoms of brain dysfunction. But the brain dysfunction is largely similar in that it all centers on metabolism.
That is a beautiful thing, and it's, once again, it's like, who knows? Maybe I was having some degree of insulin resistance, and that was what was causing my migraines. I mean, this is like ongoing research, and additionally, this was thought not to be, a possibility. But here we enter the next step that I want to take So now we're talking about depression, we're talking about schizophrenia, we're talking about bipolar disorder, anxiety. I'm seeing too much anxiety right now, and people are getting confused, and sometimes even arrhythmias are being. I mean, it's like they use it interchangeably. It's like, oh, you've got palpitations, you've got anxiety, and sometimes they don't even have anxiety, or sometimes the anxiety that they're provoking on themselves is causing the arrhythmia. But the thing is here that even inflammation is going to provoke arrhythmias. So you've got basically a situation, a metabolic storm that it's going to be affecting so many systems at the same time that we're getting what I'm appreciating is that when we have some issues because of inflammation, because of obesity, it usually will correlate with some kidney problems or some vision problems or, anxiety, which I see in my clinic. I don't think I've ever seen it. It might be because I'm in the most obesity in the United States. So I see a prevalence of this, but it goes with everything that you're saying, which, once again, when I tell people or patients that they need to implement a lifestyle change, it is not only for weight loss. This is exactly what I'm talking about. It's many of the patients that I've had, or it's, you can call it anecdotal. I don't know if it's some research right now, but focus. Focus is one of the main things that people start telling me, Doc, it's like I can pay attention now to the things that I'm doing. I don't wander off. So maybe a psych issue might be something, but maybe we can touch upon, because I do believe that people are gonna get motivated, because what I'm trying to achieve here is I want them to see how the lifestyle change will not only impact on weight loss, how it will impact on your joints, on your rheumatological possible problems, or your immune system, and on mental health, which I think right now is a big issue that we are seeing stats going up on depression and anxiety, and depression is not a fun thing. And it pisses me off when patients come to my clinic and they tell me that they saw the psychiatrist or they saw the psychologist and they were even seen by the PA, and the first thing that they got was sertraline Zoloft 50 milligrams. And then I ask them, did they ask you, when did you start feeling like this? What was the moment? Because, as somebody that I would say I've had depression in the past, for me, it was key. Reading, identifying the problem, and just, it's not about the medication. It's about what changes are you doing on your life that can help you. In addition to that, it can be meditation. It can be getting into sauna, which there's some interesting research with that as well. So right now, we can, if you want to share with us some of your exciting, because I think they are exciting, cases with patient, be it schizophrenia or depression and anxiety. And how to improve them, or if you want to share with us your experience, because I think that's also, if you don't mind me asking, but anything that you think that can motivate the people that are listening to us.
Yeah, I think that, so that before I share a couple of stories, I just want people to know, like, I could go on and on with stories. And for people who are like, well, those are just Chris Palmer's anecdotes and he's just trying to sell snake oil, or he's just trying to fool, whatever. I want to let people know we have 20 pilot trials, controlled trials underway already. 8 of them are randomized controlled trials. We have several published research trials. I have published several case studies. We just did a review article on this topic of the ketogenic diet for mental health conditions. There are over 50 publications already published in the medical peer-reviewed literature, over 1,900 people represented in those studies. So this is no longer anecdotal. This is no longer Chris Palmer just telling stories. But all of that doesn't really give you a real sense of what are we talking about? What are you really saying? And so I want to let people know that there is no doubt, as you just described, making lifestyle changes, doing a low carb or ketogenic diet can help improve brain fog or lack of concentration or mild anxiety or mild depression. And that's what millions and millions and millions of people have today. So there's no doubt that they will benefit. But I'm actually a psychiatrist who works with really, really ill people, people whose lives are devastated by schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and chronic unrelenting depression. And I am here to tell you that some of those people, I'm not saying this is a magic miracle cure for every human being on the planet, because there are lots of different things that can contribute to mental illnesses, and they include biological, psychological, and social things. So we've got to address all of them. But for some people, I have had patients who had schizophrenia. One patient, she had schizophrenia for 53 years. She was actually a patient of Dr. Eric Westman at Duke. And she initially went to him to just try to lose some weight. And she ended up putting her schizophrenia into remission off of psychiatric medications for over 15 years. 15 years. She got rid of her schizophrenia off of antipsychotic medicines. She also went ahead and lost 150 pounds and kept it off. So that was nice. Icing on the cake and extra side effect. But I have other patients who've put their schizophrenia into remission. There's one woman online, if people want to see or like follow the journey of somebody with schizophrenia, there's a woman named Lauren Kennedy. She has a YouTube channel, Living Well with Schizophrenia. She has been on a ketogenic diet for almost a year now. She just got off all of her medicines. She is symptom-free. She no longer has hallucinations and delusions. She's put her schizophrenia into remission, at least for now. And we'll have to see how things play out. But it is nothing short of a miracle. I have lots of patients, hearing from thousands of people around the world who are putting their bipolar disorder into remission. Bipolar disorder, sometimes off of medications, other patients putting depression and other things. So it's not that I'm not talking about just feeling a little better. I'm not talking about, oh, I can think a little better. I'm not talking about health and wellness. A lot of people think I'm talking about health and wellness. I'm really not talking about health and wellness. I'm talking about treating devastating, critical, severe, disabling mental disorders and putting them into remission, helping people's brains heal, helping people recover from mental illness. That's what we're talking about. So yes, that's health and wellness too. Not anti-health and wellness, but this is not just some fluffy health and wellness thing. This is about serious medical intervention for serious mental health conditions.
Well, I mean, so if something as serious as schizophrenia and being able to put in remission things like this, um, I think that I see a lot of depression and anxiety. So from your experience, I would assume that from seeing that dramatic change, are you implementing this? Do you see, maybe you see more for schizophrenia or something like that, but for depression, do you see patients for depression and anxiety and you're incorporating this and seeing this trend as well?
I do. We just have, I can't share all the details, but we have a pilot trial of the ketogenic diet for the treatment of depression in college students. It's about to be published. I think it was 16 or 18 people who participated in the study. They all came in with depression, and all of them, 100% of them, had significant improvement in mood. And the improvement in mood began within a week. So it's a pilot trial. It's a small sample size. There wasn't a control group. So there are lots of problems with the data. I get it. It's not, so we can't change our whole paradigm right now. Not yet based on that. But I'm telling you, for those people, it worked faster than an antidepressant usually works. And it was more definitive. And literally in that study, 100% of the people had mood improvement. And you don't get that with antidepressants even. And so we have other trials of, there's a total paradox that there are a few trials. There's a larger trial going on of the ketogenic diet for anorexia nervosa, believe it or not. So even though when people are starving themselves to death, they too are having a brain metabolism problem. And the ketogenic diet, for at least some of them, can help normalize their brain metabolism. The shocking thing about those trials is that usually people think about the ketogenic diet as a weight loss intervention. And for a lot of people, it is. But the paradox is that in people with anorexia nervosa, some of them can actually gain weight on a ketogenic diet and then maintain their weight. And they become less obsessed with food. They stop thinking that they're fat when they're really skinny and emaciated. Like, it corrects their brain function so that they can look in the mirror and say, I'm kind of thin. I think I maybe need to eat. And when they feel hungry, they can go ahead and eat because they know they need to eat. And it's not torture anymore.
When we speak about ketogenic diets, do you think that it is because of ketos are not only a molecule that will be used for energy? I mean, we also know it's very interesting. It's some Cell publications that show us how beta-hydroxybutyrate is actually a molecule that will decrease inflammation by diminishing the PLR3 inflammasome. So we've got inflammation going down, but I mean, also it's going to be affecting insulin. So we could also be saying that insulin resistance, and or there's also that if we start doing a ketogenic diet, we are likely, if it's done properly, we're going to be excluding things that we should not be eating, basically processed foods, ultra processed foods, etc., etc. So, I mean, I would assume that it's not only one thing, but it's likely that different things, or would you say, well, yeah, they sound great, but in my opinion, ketones play a role in either brain energy or decreasing inflammation? Do you feel anything like that, or you think it's just, I mean, do you have any hypotheses or theories?
So I think it's all of the things that you mentioned and many more. And some of the many more are it changes neurotransmitter function in the brain. It changes the gut microbiome. And those gut microbiome changes seem to confer a significant part of the benefit. And that research, they basically essentially take poop from somebody on a ketogenic diet, put it into a mouse like that has seizures or something, and then the mouse gets benefits from getting poop from a kid on a ketogenic diet. And so there's something about the microbiome changes or something that the microbes are digesting that is conferring a benefit. And then really central to my kind of thesis in brain energy is it's improving mitochondrial function. And so it improves the production of new mitochondria. It improves the quality or the type of mitochondria in your cells. And when all is said and done, if you end up doing a deep dive into, well, what exactly are those mitochondria things doing? It turns out they are doing so much for cell function. They are playing a role in neurotransmitter release and production. They are playing a role in hormones like cortisol and estrogen and testosterone. They're playing a role in inflammation, turning it on and off. They're playing a role in epigenetic expression from the cell nucleus. They're playing a role in all of these different functions of the cell. And so improving their function can improve the way the cell functions, which can reduce symptoms of a lot of different chronic physical and mental health conditions.
When I was doing this and I started also doing some of the fasting, I did notice. I mean, as somebody, as I said already, and the people that follow me know this. I mean, my ADHD, which I love because it makes me a very creative individual. Studying things that I don't like is a pain in the ass, but this fascinates me. So I started looking into things of why could it be that my focus is getting better. And one of the things I stumbled upon is something that you just mentioned: neurotransmitters. So BHP, apparently, to what I read, was that it actually increases or promotes GABA, the gamma aminobutyric acid. So the ketone, as it could be now used as energy, and also we have decreased inflammation. It has a very interesting thing. It is promoting the increase in GABA, and GABA improves. Correct me if I'm wrong. Focus on individuals. So I'm assuming that this is one of the type of neurotransmitters, but is there any other role that ketones or this is going to be affecting different neurotransmitters in the brain that we have some research upon?
It's actually impacting if you look specifically to mitochondria, it's impacting most of the neurotransmitters. So serotonin, dopamine, GABA, glutamate, acetylcholine, that they're all interconnected through these cycles through mitochondria. So mitochondria are actually producing ketones. And so if you think of like the way I think about ketones, that when you're on a ketogenic diet, it's actually less about the ketones and it's more about what the ketones represent. The ketones are a biomarker for your liver mitochondria changing your metabolism and producing all these ketones. And the ketones end up changing a lot of different physiological things. Again, hormones, neurotransmitters, inflammation, all these different things, brain energy, metabolism. It's changing all of these things. And at the end of the day, that's the point. It's all interconnected. So yes, it gets super complicated when you think about the mechanisms of action. But the bottom line is that when you're doing fasting or fasting mimicking diet, which the ketogenic diet is one type of fasting mimicking diet. But the ultimate fasting mimicking diet is fasting. It means no food, don't eat anything, maybe drink some water, and you're fasting. So some people like turn this into, oh, this is animal sourced foods versus plant sourced foods, and I hate animal sourced foods, and that's evil. And no, please don't do that. Because eating no food can get you into ketosis. And you can actually do a vegan version of a ketogenic diet, or a vegetarian version, or an omnivore version, or a carnivore version. Lots of variations of ketogenic diets. So please do not make this about animal source versus plant source foods, because it's not at all about that. But yeah, when you change your metabolism, because that's really what fasting and ketogenic diets are doing. You're changing metabolism in a good way, in a healthy way. And when you do it, obviously you can't do it forever. It's at least fasting, because if you fast too long, that's called starvation and people die. And so don't do that. I'm not saying do fasting forever and ever, because that's really bad for you. But if you do it in a balanced way, that you can actually restore your metabolic health. And when you restore your metabolic health, so many things can get better. It's about so much more than just weight loss. Yes, weight loss is one of the side effects of it, but you can improve or reverse your diabetes. You can improve autoimmune disorders, migraine headaches, all sorts of mental health conditions, all sorts of gastrointestinal conditions. I mean, you can improve so much. And the reason is because metabolism affects every cell, every tissue, every organ in the human body.
You've touched upon. I mean, I'm smiling because it's like I love doing this because I see different specialties, seeing how our lifestyle, this lifestyle, is really focusing on the root cause. One of the things that I want to get right now that he just mentioned is fasting, and there's fast bars, and that's not remove that from the equation. Do not fall victims of this false uh, concept that, yeah, I'm fasting, but I'm having my fast bar. No, 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 no. I mean, that changes absolutely everything. It's a bunch of horseshit. I mean, it's ridiculous, but people buy it. One of the biggest issues that I see with a well formulated low carb ketogenic diet is that it was easier to do 5 years ago. Right now, it's polluted with the same crap that we were not eating before. We've got protein bars, we've got donuts, we've got absolute tortillas, tamales, we've got absolutely everything in a low carb scenario. But when you start looking into these things, you're starting seeing that it's being replaced sometimes by even more calories, which is a different thing than it was previously. So when we're talking about fasting, it's fasting. Now, one thing, I've been some like just brainstorm here, but do you see, let me organize my thought here. Is there a particular window? Because I when I tell people to fast, I always tell them to start with low carb first. And my experience is that when they initiate low carb first, it's easier to start then in a couple of weeks incorporating fasting. Do you have a particular mechanism or like protocol in which you, or different windows, 16-8, OMAD one, or you do a 5 and 2, or is there anything that, I'm assuming that it depends on the patient, right? But is there any protocol that you follow?
So it really completely depends on the patient. So I have some patients that I would never recommend fasting for. And in general, those patients are underweight. So if somebody is underweight already, I may in fact have them on a ketogenic diet for a metabolic therapy, but I probably would not encourage them to fast because they'll lose more weight, and they may have the problem in part because they're malnourished, they're underweight, they don't have enough muscle mass, they don't have enough protein, whatever. So there are some, and like growing kids would be another category. If you are a young child growing up, some of them are on ketogenic diets, like children with treatment-resistant epilepsy, for example, will be put on ketogenic diets sometimes, and it can be a miracle cure for them. Some kids can absolutely stop seizing, even when medications didn't stop. But if they're growing, I wouldn't ask them to fast because they need the calories, the ketogenic calories, but they need the calories to keep growing. Whereas other people are morbidly obese and have sky-high blood sugars. And if you are morbidly obese and have sky-high blood sugars, then the first thing I'm going to want to do is kind of manage in a safe way your diabetes medicines if you're on those. Because if I ask you to fast, your blood sugars are going to start plummeting. And we need to make sure that you don't go too low. Because if you're on insulin every day, then I'm not going to ask you to fast until we figure out what are we going to do with all that insulin. Like maybe we're going to stop it or hold it or at least reduce it and then monitor and then reduce it more. But I've certainly had some patients who have obesity, type 2 diabetes, who I've had fast for, 7 days. And it can be sometimes, with some of those people, it can be nothing short of miraculous when you see what happens in that 7 days. Like they start off the week, I'm depressed, I'm inflamed, my sinuses are all clogged, like everything sucks, my blood sugars are so high, I'm brain fogged, I have no motivation, I have no energy. I'm like, let's do a water fast if you can. And I don't just jump in. This can take weeks of talking and negotiation and preparation, all that kind of stuff. But when they finally jump in and they do it, I'll tell you all now, the second day really, really sucks. The second day in particular sucks. You're going to be hangry. You're going to be irritable. You're going to be weak. You're going to be dizzy. It's going to be awful. But I talk people through it, and we figure out electrolytes and making sure you're drinking lots of water through all of this. Please don't do a dry fast. do a wet fast, drink lots of water, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. But then when they get to the third or fourth day,
Yeah.
they almost always get this high. They start saying, oh my God, I'm not hungry anymore. How's that possible? I'm not hungry. I've lost my hunger, but now I'm going to go clean out the garage that's been a mess for years. Or now I'm going to get those piles of paper off of my desk and I'm going to like deal with them and manage them. And toward the end, it's like they'll say, wow, my nose, I can breathe through my nose now. My sinuses aren't all stuffy. And like everything seems to be better. My mood is better. My cognition is better. My energy is better. Like everything got better. And then almost always I'm going to start refeeding with low carb ketogenic diet. We're not going off like if they start eating donuts, it's all over. And then they're just back to square one. So of course we're going to be doing that. But I agree with what you said. I typically would not ask someone to start with a fast, even like skip a meal here or there, like even a 16-hour fast or something. I actually wouldn't start there. I think it's easier for people to acclimate to a low carb or a ketogenic diet first and teach their body how to burn fat again, because most often their body has forgotten how to burn fat. So you want to reteach your body how to burn fat. And I'm kind of being a little, for the scientists or physicians out there, I know we're not teaching it, but you're upregulating fat burning enzymes and other things. That's what you're really doing. You're allowing your body to adapt to fat burning. And once your body is adapted to fat burning, then it will be much easier to do fasting on top of it.
That is key. I mean, for the listeners right now, I always recommend initiating, and Sachin Panda speaks about different fasting windows. You can even start with a 12-12. I mean, as ridiculous as it might sound, it's like, that's not fasting. Well, for some people it is. And then you can slowly start increasing. I just recently came out of a 6-day fast. I wasn't planning to do a 6-day fast, but I started again with my more strict low carb. In my case, I was doing more like a carnivore-ish for a while, which many cardiologists would like, what the hell is this guy talking about, carnivore? And I did that, and I went for 6, and everything that you just mentioned is I started becoming once again more, even my mood when I was doing very complicated cases, my calmness when I was doing them. I mean, I not to brag, I mean, I consider myself skillful, and even the people notice that. It's like my mood, I mean, I'm not as grouchy maybe, and a lot of things changed. But in this situation, one day, which I was planning 48 turned into 3 days and then 4 days. But I think you nailed it. Day 2 sucks. Day 2 is the one. But once you're done with day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, they're practically the same. The only thing that I've noticed with myself and some of the patients, which are few that have done a prolonged fast, is when we are exercising, because I usually keep exercising, is weights. Aerobic exercise is usually not a problem. Weights, you'll feel it. You won't even want to do weights. So, I mean, it's a very cool thing, which I want to get right now in a minute to maybe what you just mentioned about ketogenic diets. But have you thought about, because this is something that research in cardiology over the last 7 years approximately, we've seen studies in which they are actually using ketones, exogenous ketones, for the failing myocardium. And it turns out that in heart failure, we see that PHP or ketones are the preferred molecule for energy, and they actually need less oxygen in order to function, which goes along with ischemia and very, very interesting studies. Which then makes me think, in patients with heart failure, with everything we're seeing, one of the things that we see with SGLTs, Farxiga and aldoglosins, is that one of the things is sometimes ketones go up. So I think there's different mechanisms in which we're seeing, yes, you're peeing sugar, but you also decrease inflammation. There's less adipokines, and we're also seeing a little bit more of these ketones floating around. So these medications are actually now prescribed for heart failure, either preserved ejection fraction or with systolic heart failure, but they are prescribed. And if we start looking into the science of it, sometimes they don't see it, but for me, that is a key point. And the other thing that I was thinking about, I do believe, and I've said it in the past, I do believe that ketones, exogenous ketones, have a therapeutic role in what comes to be heart failure, and also the possibility of medium chain triglycerides, in particular maybe C8, which is, I think, caprylic acid, right? Let me see. Yeah, caprylic acid. So do you think that there could be a role, or have you thought about it, or is anybody using for either depression or the cognitive pathologies, ketones or MCT oils in order to treat, manage, improve this type of symptoms, or there's nothing around that you're aware of?
I'm aware of, Mary Newport is a physician who has used exogenous ketones, MCT oil, other things to treat Alzheimer's disease. She used it in her husband, wrote a book, has used it in hundreds of patients, at least.
What's her name? I'm not familiar with her work.
Mary Newport, Newport.
Okay.
So she published a case report, a case series of, I think, like 300 people that she had heard from, who had tried exogenous ketones or just MCT oil. They didn't change their diets actually necessarily. So they didn't necessarily go on a ketogenic diet. And there was at least some report of cognitive improvement. I'm not aware. So I have used exogenous ketones with many of my patients. And I will say this, it doesn't compare at all to an actual ketogenic diet. So exogenous, I wish it did. I really wish it did, because it's so much easier to just drink a bottle of ketones and keep eating whatever the hell you want to eat. But unfortunately, it's not that easy. So I think it's just important to say the benefits of a ketogenic diet are much, 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 much greater than the benefits of drinking a bottle of ketones. Nonetheless, drinking ketones might be beneficial. I agree with it. The heart failure stuff I've seen. We should be thinking about it in the exact same way for stroke patients. Like, why wouldn't we be thinking about ketone? Maybe get ketone infusion for a stroke patient to try to save brain tissue. I think that we can think about it in much more sophisticated ways for those kind of emergency situations. But I have not seen any compelling research with depression or anxiety, which is what you asked me about. And one of the
One of the studies, actually, I remember with ketones, it improved myocardial blood flow, So that makes, sense. And I agree with you. When I talk about exogenous ketones or an MCT oil, I'm not saying that you follow a traditional whatever diet. No. What I'm talking about is, and I don't think there's anything around, but it's doing a low carb lifestyle. In addition, then you can do that, or doing a ketogenic and just ramp up your ketos to a certain extent, which is something that I think Dominic D'Agostino mentioned in treating seizures in kids, because in kids it's quite challenging, and it can help them there. But I guess I extrapolated that into this scenario, which of course, it's in infancy, but doing this type of studies is very challenging because there's no money around it. There's no patent for exogenous ketones, like exogenous salts. They're cheap, so I'm not sure anybody. Maybe MVMN, which is the esters. But anyways, this is something that I've been having there, and it makes me wonder if people with Alzheimer's and other neurocognitive issues, because for example, Richard Isaacson, which the last time I knew he was in New York, he's a neurologist. he, in part of his protocol for Alzheimer treatment is omega-3s and is MCT oils. And there's one called, I don't care, I'm not promoting it, but I think it's brain octane, which is mostly caprylic acid. It's C8, and it's the one that turns most into ketones. So it's a very interesting scenario with everything that you've just mentioned. It just makes me more curious in how it is that we can impact. And one of the things, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, in addition to C8, there's other research looking at C10, decanoate acid, and that C10 seems to actually have anti-seizure properties just by itself. Even if you're not on a ketogenic diet, if you drink C10, at least some preliminary evidence suggests that it might have anti-seizure properties. So I want to come back to that because I know people are looking for, tell me what to do. Is it C8? Is it C10? Is it MCT? Is it what? What I want to say is the best evidence that we have now. If you have a health condition, certainly if you have a brain condition and you want to try anything that we're talking about to improve it, the best evidence we have is called the ketogenic diet. It means you change your diet to induce ketosis. You're going to eat real whole foods. You're not eating the Costco keto ice cream. You're not having the keto. You're not having the keto Atkins bars. You're not having any of that junk food because that's keto junk food, but it's still junk. So you're not eating any of that. You're eating real whole foods and you're inducing a state of ketosis. And that is the best bet because we have over 100 years of evidence for that intervention in epilepsy. And it turns out that we use epilepsy treatments for pretty much every mental health condition that we have. So there's strong reason to believe that the ketogenic diet can do that. Nonetheless, I am really excited about all of this other research and about all of these other possibilities. Because if we can make it easier, if we can let somebody drink a bottle of C8 or a C10 or MCT oil or whatever, or ketones, if we can allow people to drink these things, or if we can infuse these things in a heart attack victim right as it's happening to try to save heart tissue, like this field offers so much potential. And again, why? Because it's metabolism, and metabolism determines whether your cells live or die. Metabolism determines whether your cells function properly or not. And it is foundational to health across a wide range of diagnoses.
And for many, and this is something key because many people will go, and I still see him getting attacked, and it's like the only thing that a ketogenic diet works for is seizures. And I would point you toward a book. It's called The Ketogenic Diet in Metabolic Therapies: Expanded Roles in Health and Diseases. Susan Masino is the author, and this book will show you the research, even in its infancy, but in many different areas in which there is tremendous potential in ketogenic diets. And one of the things that I tell people when we are speaking ketogenic, and the reason why their physicians might just go ape shit crazy when they hear it is because they're imagining people putting butter in everything and your pork lard, and you're just chugging down bacon. But a ketogenic diet basically means ketones, and genic, production. So a ketogenic diet can vary. You can create a mimicking ketogenic diet by a different fasting window. There's people that can have ketogenic windows even when they are going up to 100 grams of carbs per day. But something that Chris mentioned beautifully is that ketogenic diet can be vegan, can be vegetarian, can be pescatarian, can be omnivore, can be paleo, can be whatever the hell you want. And that is one of the reasons when I say it, I say you're doing a modified Mediterranean diet. Because the Mediterranean diet has beautiful research in health improvements, in cardiology, plaque regression, soft plaque regression, and a lot of improvements in different cognitive disorders and anxiety, depression, even in cancer. So when the patient tells their physician, I'm doing a modified Mediterranean diet, nobody says absolutely anything. And that is, I mean, and yeah, I mean, it's just, it's, they don't even understand.
Good job.
Exactly. And I mean, and I've had my patients that they tell them, it's like, yeah, I mean, I told them that first it's like, it's beautiful. You're doing fantastic. What on earth are you doing? Oh, I'm doing a ketogenic diet. You're gonna kill yourself. It's like, just look at the labs. Just look at their triglycerides. Just look at the HDL. Look at the insulin, the fasting insulin, inflammation, the C-reactive protein. It's everything improves. Their blood pressure. They're not taking medication now for their hypertension. So everything, single cardiovascular risk factor that is impacted in a ketogenic low-carb diet. The only thing that sometimes makes physicians freak out, which we know how to deal, is cholesterol. Yeah, we can talk about large particles, low particles, but here's my point. When you see 10 friggin' variables improving and they lost weight, which means that their adipokines are not inflammatory anymore. Inflammation, even flu, we know, causes heart attacks and causes, because of plaque disruption, causes strokes. When we're speaking about this as a whole, there is one thing. In addition, you have large particles. Hey, you want to bring them down? Just chuck down 20 or 40 grams of carbs and you're going to bring it down. So for me, that concept in which they freak out with saying, well, a ketogenic diet, it's just they do not understand all of the variables that are being impacted, which, talking about fasting, talking about mitochondria, do you have any particular... So we've got CoQ10, and CoQ10 is required for the electron transport in the mitochondria. And we also know that statins will impact this. So do you have any concern about statins in mental health? Because it will affect, I mean, we know that it affects mitochondria in the electron transport chain. So do you have any, or I mean, any concerns about this? Because what are the, I mean, I see all type of research and it's presented in cardiology meetings. It doesn't really affect in a negative way. But I do have my patients that they tell me that their mental fog improves, that their depression improves. It might be placebo. It might be just thinking that they think that they're going to improve. What's your take on that?
You see improvement with a statin or
Taking it off.
Oh.
Yeah.
With taking off the statin. So, so for people who don't know, statins used to actually have a black box warning from the FDA about cognitive impairment. And that early on it was recognized that statins appeared to impair cognition, at least in some people. And then the manufacturers went to great lengths to get that removed. And now there are some authorities that will say LDL cholesterol causes everything, including Alzheimer's disease. And so everybody should be on statins and lower your LDL cholesterol as much as possible. And as long as if you can lower it to zero, that would be great. And I'm certainly not in that camp. I am worried about statins because we do know that they can impair mitochondrial function, at least in some people. Through CoQ10, through other mechanisms, they can impair mitochondrial function. So when people get like leg pain, like muscle cramps and stuff from statins, that is thought to be mitochondrial in nature. The reason for those muscle cramps is thought to be mitochondrial dysfunction. Cholesterol overall is good for cells. It is required. It is required for cell membranes. It is backbone of key hormones like cholesterol, like cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, and others. So, I am not persuaded that taking high doses of statins to lower cholesterol as much as humanly possible is the best strategy for everything else. Like there will be some cardiologists who will say, but this is the way to prevent a heart attack. And then I want to ask the logical question, did anybody bother to measure brain function in those same studies? does anybody care about brain function? And there are some studies that have found associations between statin use and some brain conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. There have been other studies that have said those associations aren't true. So the real answer is that it's right now, based on the science published, you're going to get really polarized, confusing messages from different people and different groups. At the end of the day, I think the American public, the world public, the world deserves to know the truth. And the truth may, in fact, be kind of complicated. It might be for some people, these are really life-saving, helpful medications. And for others, maybe they're harmful. Because I think at the end of the day, I think we could probably safely say that about every medicine. There are some medicines that can be really helpful and life-saving for one person, and somebody else can have a fatal allergic reaction to that same medicine. So it can kill them. And both can be true. Both of those things can be true. It can be helpful for one person and harmful for another. And, we're not allowed to have those conversations in the medical field. It's you're either black or white. It's either good or bad. Like you've got to be on board with the dogma. Statins are great. Everybody should be on them. We should put them in the water. And if you say anything against statins, then you're a conspiracy theorist. You're anti-science. We're going to cancel you. And we need more sophisticated conversations than that.
Yeah, I think one of the strong, I'm very careful. As a cardiologist, it becomes a pain in the ass actually dealing with this because, I consider every variable that is related to cardiovascular disease as an important one. I'm not going to deny LDL, but I have to take everything as a whole. And if I am improving every single variable that I know as a cardiologist will decrease my cardiovascular events, I'm not going to freak out in certain situations and say, we have to do this. And even more so, sometimes when the patient tells me that they're not feeling well. So it's like, okay, let's explore something different. Now, more recent recommendations from the cardiovascular field is do not go to the high intensity 80 milligrams of atorva or 40 milligrams of Crestor, but doing half, maybe 40 of atorva and 20 of Crestor, and combine it with ezetimibe and then figure it out depending on the patient's symptoms, etc. But then I have my neurology colleagues who actually freak out because many neurologists, they just don't like the LDL that low. But once again, I think just like we have spoken about SSRIs or other medications associated with depression that you use in psychiatry, we have to understand that, yes, as I tell people, medications don't cure, they manage. And that goes with identifying the root cause. Have you identified where on earth this is coming from? Do you have an idea? Have you actually looked for it? Or you're just saying, here you go, take it, And here's where I find other things, and you've mentioned about them. You've mentioned exercise, but sleep. Sleep, I think, is another thing that is widely undermined, just like meditation or just relaxation, because the amount of stress that people have in their life, be it from the bad news, I tell people don't watch the news anymore. It's you have to reduce stress, because if you're stressed, which a lot of people are, and then they're worrying about their family members and their friends and their job and blah blah blah, then stress impacts the next thing, which is sleep. But stress by itself causes inflammation, causes cortisol, causes hyperinsulinemia. Well, decreased sleep also screws you up. So, do you also focus on things like that, on improving sleep hygiene and exercise, meditations? I even focus sometimes on some people with sauna, which there's some interesting Japanese research in people with heart failure. Like, you're going to kill the guy. Well, yeah, if you're getting him, he's hypotensive and you're giving him diuretics, we have to manage that carefully. But, for me, we've got many different tools that need to be explored much further, emphasized much further, that I don't think we do. I don't think there's many physicians that ask, how are you sleeping? Hey, are you snoring? Maybe I do it because my population, everybody has those issues. So I mean, is that in your usual visit when you speak with your patients? Their sleep hygiene, stress, all that stuff.
100%. Like, I mean, so it's really, there are 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, and it's, nutrition or diet, exercise, um, uh, sleep, reducing harmful substance use if you're using anything like tobacco, vaping, alcohol, other things, stress reduction. And then the last one usually is relationships or purpose in life. Those are the 6 core buckets. And I will be the first to say that if any of those buckets are off in you, if they're really off kilter, you're probably not going to be thriving in life. You could be following the perfect diet. And if you're not sleeping well, you're not going to have optimal health. Likewise, you could be following the perfect diet and sleeping well. And if you're using marijuana and alcohol every single day, you are probably not going to have very good health. And you go all the way, like even if you're doing all 5 of the buckets, but you don't have any meaningful relationships in your life, and you're lonely as hell, and you feel like nobody cares about you, and you really don't matter, you're not thriving. Like, we're humans. We are meant to have a purpose. We are meant to have other people in our lives. And so if you're missing any of those 6 pillars, something is probably going to be off. Tragically, for a lot of people, especially here in the United States, many, many people have all of those buckets are off. That their diet is off. They're really not moving that much. They're staring at a screen all the time. They're lonely as hell. They're using substances to numb their pain. Their lives are just kind of a mess. Like 1/3 of Americans are not getting adequate sleep. 1/3. And why? Because we're all staying up late, binge watching Netflix, playing video games, scrolling on social media, doom scrolling, like whatever you're doing. There are a million things you can do instead of sleep, and everybody's doing all these things instead of sleeping. And then when you don't get enough sleep, then you're stressed. And then you're more likely to overeat, or you're more likely to eat comfort foods or junk food. And then you feel like crap. So who's got the energy to go exercise? Who wants to exercise when you feel like crap? And, and it just spirals out of control. So it's not, some people will hear that and say, oh my God, 6 different things. This is so complicated. It's really not that complicated. It's basic human health. And these things aren't rocket science. You don't have to do them all at once. Like if you're one of those people who's got 4 or 5 or 6 of them off kilter, don't panic. Don't stress. Just recognize, okay, I got some work to do. It's taken a lot of years for me to get in this kind of hole that I'm in. And just recognize you're in a hole. And it's going to take a little bit of time to climb out of this hole. And you're going to do it one step at a time, or you're going to pull yourself up, 1 arm length at a time. And that means maybe I'll make some changes in my diet first. Then next week or 2 weeks from now, then I'll start to work on my sleep a little. And then maybe I'll cut back on the alcohol a month or 2 from now. And then maybe I'll like call a friend that I haven't called in years, because God, I am lonely. I'm so lonely. Why doesn't anybody like me? I guess I haven't called anyone. Maybe I should just pick up the phone and call. Actually call them, not text them. Call them, and they'll be like, who the hell is this? Why are you calling me?
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah. It's like right now, like sometimes, I even feel with certain people, like I have to ask permission to give them a call, like send a text before I call. It's like that is it's ridiculous. One thing that I saw a brief question on this. I mean, Matthew Walker in his book of Why We Sleep, I mean, it's. I think it says 6 hours. Do you have any different number of the minimum amount of sleep that we require? You ask a patient to have?
Minimum is 6. I mean, optimal amount of sleep for adults appears to be about 7 hours of sleep. So it doesn't have to be 8, but the reality is everyone's different.
Different.
So how do you know how much sleep you need? You need to be able to wake up in the morning and get out of bed feeling reasonably refreshed. So that means if you are pushing the snooze alarm over and over and over again every morning, and I used to be one of those people.
Yeah.
If you're pushing the snooze alarm 3 times, 4 times, 6 times, you're not getting enough sleep. You're just not. And then if you have to drag yourself out of bed, even if you don't use the snooze alarm, even if you just have to if you drag yourself out of bed and you're like, oh, another day, I'm so tired, I wish I could just sleep more. You're not getting enough sleep. Wait, newsflash, you're not getting enough sleep. If you're dozing off during the day, if you can't sit through a meeting or if you can't read a book without dozing off, if you're dozing off, you're probably not getting enough sleep. And, or the other reason for that is that you are metabolically unhealthy and your brain is just not working right. Your brain is trying to recover, but something's off. And so I would say those are the things. So the hallmarks of getting enough sleep, like, are you a 6-hour person, a 7-hour person, an 8-hour person? You'll know because you'll be able to wake up in the morning, most mornings, and feel reasonably refreshed. You'll be able to get through the day without falling asleep, without feeling like I need a nap. You'll be able to get through the day. And that's how you'll know you're getting enough sleep.
What percentage of your patients would you say have either are overweight or have obesity?
For mine, it's probably like 80 to 90% of my patients are overweight or obese.
Damn, I wasn't expecting that. I mean, that's my number in the most obesity in the United States. Your patients are also like that. That's scary.
Mental health patients are much more. So this isn't after I've gotten treating them because once I've treated patients, they are getting thinner, and I have patients who've lost 150 pounds, kept it off, 80 pounds, but I'm talking about when they first come to me, like my patients are at a disadvantage because almost always they are being prescribed pills that cause them to gain weight no matter what. Like the pills actually increase insulin levels just on their own without any food change. The pills cause the pancreas to release insulin. And, you talked a little bit ago about the animal experiments where they just inject insulin and it causes atherosclerosis with nothing else different. High levels of insulin are not good for human health. They're not optimal for human health. And so unfortunately, people with mental health diagnoses are often getting prescribed pills that are making it was already hard enough. Life was already hard enough for them. That's why they went to a psychiatrist. And then we prescribed them pills that unfortunately make their physical health even worse, make their metabolic health even worse. And now they're really fighting an uphill battle.
When people come to my clinic for palpitations or for anxiety, I made it routine to ask, when was the first time that you remember that you encountered this anxiety? Do you remember what happened at that point in time? Yeah, and then I usually, have you confronted this? Have you had help? Have you had a psychotherapist, a psychologist or something? Usually the answer is no. And the first thing is giving a SSRI or an antidepressant or something like that. And I tell patients, whoever your mental health professional is, stop seeing him, because I have no respect to anybody who should be working with mental health And the first thing that they do is just give a medication without really knowing the patient. It pisses me off. I mean, I've told many patients that, and I really want to emphasize it because I have no doubt in my mind that lifestyle modifications should come first. I'm not saying that you should not get medication for mental health, but I'm saying they should be a tool, a help to your lifestyle, which needs to be addressed by the mental health professional. And I don't know what you think about it. I'm assuming you're in the same boat. It's just not about, oh, here's your pill, get out of here, 15 minutes, you're done.
I mean, the really sad news is that is the way the mental health field is structured right now. And I at least want to just put in a word of defense for the psychiatrists, because most people who go into the mental health field actually are really good people, and they really authentically want to help the patients that they're seeing. And they're being told that, no, this is the way you have to do it. We don't care if you like it or not. You've got to see 4 patients every hour. That gives you 15 minutes with a patient if you're lucky, as long as you're taking notes while you're talking to them. So the psychiatrist isn't even looking at you while you're talking or while you're crying about how depressed you are. They're just typing it into the computer.
Yeah.
And then here's your prescription. And I know a lot of psychiatrists who are in work environments like that, and they hate it. They hate it. They are disgusted with the profession, that this is what they've been resorting. So a lot of the good psychiatrists, I'll say, don't take insurance for that reason, because they don't want to be part of that system.
Mm-hmm.
But then unfortunately, that means if you are somebody who doesn't have a lot of money and you need to use your health insurance, well, good luck finding somebody who's going to spend any time talking to you and trying to help you solve your problem. So I agree with you. The model of a doctor seeing you for 10 or 15 minutes and just doling out pill after pill after pill, that model is not working.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not whether I like it or not. What I'm here to say is that model is not working. People are not getting better. More and more people are getting depressed and anxious and ADHD and everything else. And all of those pills that we are doling out are not helping enough. And it's not that people can't be helped by pills. And if you're one of the people who's being helped by pills, great. Congratulations. I'm glad for you. And I don't want anybody to take away your pills.
Yeah.
But millions and millions and millions of people are going to psychiatrists and nurse practitioners and family practitioners and internal medicine doctors and others begging for help. And they're getting pill after pill after pill after pill, and they're still not better. And we need a different model of mental health care.
Yeah, I think every specialty is stuck in that situation, and I will say the thing that for me, it was I did in total of 17 years of training. With my research and internal medicine and cardiology, intervention, blah 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 blah, and I think I got in a point in my career where it's like I was stenting people. I was doing critical ischemia, and I'm like, and they're back 6 months after. They're back a year later, and I'm like, what the hell did I do? And then when I started implementing the things that I was learning for myself, slowly but surely, controlled with my patients, I think I've received, or I found, the greatest gratification, which I did not like. I was frustrated with my career. I honestly, I got into medicine because I did not want to. I hated routine, more with ADHD, of course, you can imagine. I can't stand it, and it became routine. It became the same crap over and over again, and I did not feel I was doing a difference. So one of the things that I do with my patients now is this podcast is one of them. I've got my videos that, I would like to spend with you 40 minutes, 1 hour to explain. Here's the video. I have it. I just cannot repeat it right now. And it's proven to be very helpful with my patients. And for me, as a cardiologist, being able to help patients lose 100 pounds in a year without the help of, I'm not saying that I work with nutritionists, I work with RDs, but I have been able to do that, which is something that with my traditional training and teachings, I would have thought it would be impossible, So I did not want to sound like a prick when I was saying this about psychiatrists, but I think there was a point in which I gave up on everything myself as well. And the reason I found it was because I just did not like what was happening to me. That was the reason. I did not do this because it was not working for patients. I started this because it was not working for me. And I think that that's a rhetoric that we find frequently on different specialties of people that emphasize and feel very passionately about this. And I think that has been, well, that was the origin for you to what I remember the story you said about your sisters. I believe that they got pissed. Like, how can you resist this in Thanksgiving, and I think that hopefully people get motivated. I know a lot of there's Spanish speaking here, and I will translate this. I will have subtitles. I'll make a summary of this so you can really understand the impact and the importance of this. For last couple of thoughts, are there any tools, or let's just say supplements? Is there anything that, I mean, how do you feel about them? I mean, not as a cure, not as a treatment, but maybe as a tool or something that can help. Is there anything there that you were like, it's worth a shot?
I think there's lots of supplements that might play a role in some people in some circumstances. As a rule of thumb, I'm not a huge fan of putting people on 20 different vitamins and supplements and stuff like that. So I know that there are some practitioners who do that, and that's not me. I'm actually actively opposed to that, just like I'm opposed to a psychiatrist putting somebody on 20 medicines. I'm not a huge fan of that. The two, if you will, supplements that I actually probably most strongly recommend are, number one, magnesium.
Okay.
Why? Because a lot of people are deficient in magnesium. Magnesium plays a critical role in all sorts of cell functions, including metabolic functions. Magnesium has been shown to, for some people, possibly help with sleep, anxiety, chronic pain, some other things. So I usually use magnesium. And then the other thing that I actually usually strongly recommend is light salt. So half and half sodium chloride and potassium chloride. And the main reason is so some experts who know about, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the studies, but some experts think that it's really about decreasing your sodium use. They think of sodium as really harmful. And if you could just decrease your sodium use, everything would be better. And so light salt is cutting your sodium in half. And you get half potassium chloride. I actually personally suspect, based on a lot of science, I suspect actually a lot of people are relatively potassium deficient. And that increasing potassium may actually be the more important mechanism. But what we know is that there was actually a randomized controlled trial over 6,000 people in China. Half of them got regular salt, half of them got this light salt. Half and half. There was a 30% reduction in cardiovascular events. 30% actual reduction. That is more powerful than any statin on the planet. Just simple light salt. And it can possibly reduce blood pressure. It reduced in that large randomized controlled trial, it reduced actual cardiovascular events, which usually is death, or close to it, unless you get to Dr. Assad fast enough that he saved your life. But, yeah, so, those are the two. And usually when I'm prescribing low carb diets, those are the things that people become deficient in, is those electrolytes. calcium, potassium, and magnesium. So I go ahead and recommend those. But even if people aren't on a low carb diet, I still recommend them, and I recommend them indefinitely.
One of the cool things that I mean, this is definitely, and this was one of the first issues that I had, and there's very interesting data regarding electrolytes and sodium. There was actually one study about 4 years ago in Jack that he actually spoke about CHF exacerbation patients and low sodium, and actually those that were having low sodium diets actually were doing worse. I'll touch upon that in a bit. I mean, it might make some cardiologists like, just what the hell are you talking about? But when people are doing low carb, I'm pretty sure you do it, but if you have done low carb, you've done fasting, you know that you're gonna feel like crap if you're not actually taking more sodium than what is recommended. So one of the things that I see with this is when people do a good low carb, they're not having ultra processed, so they're not getting the amounts of sodium that might be like, I don't know, 6 grams in a hyperinsulinemic state. A hyperinsulinemic state is very different to a ketogenic or low carb state. So, the recommendations that come from Stephen Feeney and The Art and Science of Low Carb Living are actually 3 to 5 grams of sodium per day. When people speak about salt, though, you have to understand, people that I'm speaking to you right now, is that salt is sodium chloride. 40% is sodium, 60% is chloride. So if you are chugging down 6 grams of salt, you're actually chugging down 2.4 grams of sodium. So it's not, if you're chugging down salt is not the sodium recommended. So you there's also have to be a point to that. And as Chris was saying, the dosage for potassium, it's also from 3 to 4 grams per day, and magnesium. Because if not, people start getting headaches, and that's one of the explanations for the keto flu. And they say, I tried. Yeah, of course you tried, but you felt like crap, so you stopped doing it because of that. And that is sometimes a limiting factor because they're too scared. So, and I don't know how you're doing with time, but if you have to go, just let me know. I talk too much, but
No, I'm good. I get with. Maybe we can do a little bit more, and then we'll wrap up.
And another point that I wanted to talk about is because with cardiology, one of the things that I started doing when I was implementing this, I had people resistant to furosemide, to Lasix, to torsemide, pitolisant. They were in the hospital getting IV and they were not responding. Now, when I was reading about it, you go and you see some nephrologists and some people in Europe that they were actually using hypertonic saline in combination with diuretic for people with CHF exacerbation that they were not responding. Which, in this situation, it got me thinking, if I'm recommending low carb to a patient with heart failure, let's call it a modified Mediterranean diet, because then somebody's going to misquote me. So let's say we're doing a modified Mediterranean diet and the patient is not getting ultra processed food. So I need to emphasize on this guy that he needs to chug down 4 grams of sodium. You might say, but the recommendation is 2.8. Not after you understand the physiology of how the loop diuretics work and how the studies over there with hypertonic saline basically resolved the resistant states to diuretics. I had a patient. This I will remember him. There's a post on this. He was with home oxygen, swollen up, just miserable. And I'm like, you know what? We've got nothing to lose. You want to try something different here? And okay. So he went low carb. I told him to take more sodium. I went to 3-4 grams. I told him, you're going to do this. You're going to eat your ribeye. You're going to eat your vegetables. Like, ribeye? Your ribeye. In 1 week, the guy lost 22 pounds of water.
Wow.
He was not, and this has, once you understand the physiology and the glycogen and how the glycogen is adhered to 3 times its weight in water and they're diuresing, now it starts making more sense how the sodium that he was eating, that he was probably depleted. Because in addition, if you have been taking furosemide high dosages all of your life, where the hell is your body getting the sodium if you're not giving it to it? How is sodium supposed to work if you don't have it? Demineralizing the bone? So once you start just questioning things, it's an amazing thing how just tweaking, thinking, and applying. And I think for me, that is just, it's hard for Yeah, when I mentioned, I mean, I remember mentioning this to my colleagues, nephrologists and stuff. Some were like, "Well, that sounds interesting." Other is like, "You're freaking crazy." So it's those things that I've seen your post in X and Twitter, and I mean, like I'm like, holy cow! It must be a pain in the ass when he starts getting flooded with his negative comments because I know that you believe it, you see it with your patients. Well, it's an observation that doesn't count. Well, for you it doesn't count, but for the patient who has changed his life completely, it's worth diamonds. So yeah, I think one last thing. Do you see what's your take on GLPs and mental health? Because I keep seeing this, and we now see that people are not. I mean, it decreases their cravings for cocaine and for addictive disorders, and of course, there's benefits, but I think that the benefits are coming from the lifestyle changes that they are implementing from be either semaglutide or tirzepatide or whatever. Any thoughts on that?
It's I think is a really important question because the GLP-1 receptor agonists are increasingly being said that they're good for everything. It's good for everything that ails you. It was, for a lot of people don't even know this. They were actually a type 2 diabetes medicine. And then they turned into the weight loss craze that everybody's talking about. But now people are talking about them for heart failure and sleep apnea and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and all sorts of things. And sure enough, yes, the brain's included in all of that. So they're really hyper focusing on they possibly have an antidepressant effect. So we have epidemiological studies of people with type 2 diabetes, for example, who were prescribed those versus other diabetes meds. And on average, people were less depressed when they were taking GLP-1 receptor agonists. Addiction is the biggest thing that they're being studied for. Alcoholism, cocaine addiction, nicotine addiction, opioid addiction. And in fact, we've got controlled trials underway of GLP-1 receptor agonists for all of those addictions. And then people are interested in whether they might help bipolar, schizophrenia. If nothing else, maybe they'll just help prevent all the weight gain from the pills that they're getting prescribed. But insurance companies usually aren't covering that right now. They say if you haven't gained the weight, then we're not gonna prescribe a $1,600 a month pill, or it's not a pill, it's an injection. But we're not going to prescribe something that costs $1,600 a month for the obesity that hasn't even happened yet. Which is really kind of unfortunate and unfair to patients because we're putting them on pills that are causing massive weight gain, and they do kind of have a right to have us try to mitigate that. So I think that the jury's still out. We don't have really good randomized controlled trials of GLP-1 receptor agonists for these other disorders. In the same way that they can help some people lose weight, if a person's not willing to try anything else, then fine, I'm not going to stand in the way. Yes, losing weight is better. If you're obese, losing some weight is better than not losing some weight. And if a GLP-1 receptor agonist can help you do that, I'm all for it. There are patients who are doing low carbon keto diets and it's just not working enough for them for some reason. I actually do believe they probably have a root cause that we haven't figured out. Maybe they have low thyroid hormone or low testosterone or low something that somebody hasn't even tested for. And that may be part of their problem. So, but some clinicians are not bothering looking for any of that, and they just put them on the GLP-1 receptor agonist. At the end of the day, I am a big fan of helping people live their best lives with or without pills. What I will say is that we have been searching for these great pills that are going to save everyone's lives. We have been searching for pills that will help people lose weight. Fen-phen, stimulants in the 1950s and 60s. This is not a new field. We have been searching for weight loss pills for decades. We've been searching for pills that will treat depression and anxiety and bipolar and everything else And although we are flooded with pills, we have more pills than we've ever had. We have so many treatment options. We have a chronic disease epidemic. More people in America are overweight or obese than ever before. More people in America have diabetes or prediabetes than ever before. And sadly, more people in America have depression, have anxiety disorders, have opioid use disorder, have, our deaths of despair. Deaths of despair have surpassed the Great Depression. More people are dying of suicide, overdose deaths, alcohol-related deaths than even during the Great Depression, when the unemployment rate was 25%, when people were standing in food lines 3 blocks long to just be able to eat one meal in one day. When we had no safety net in place, there was no Social Security back then. There was nothing. People were homeless. They were destitute. They were hungry. So it's natural that they were drinking themselves to death or killing themselves or doing other things that deaths of despair drive them to do. Today, in 2024, we have more of those deaths than they had back then. And I'm really sorry. You might be a person who's got a really crappy life, and I'm sorry for you. But on average, Americans do not have as crappy of lives as they did during the Great Depression. We do not have an epidemic of misery and suffering and poverty and malnourishment and starvation. We just don't have that. And it doesn't make sense. We should not be that miserable. And yet we are, despite all of the pills we've got. And at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that is a problem. And we need to wake up to that problem. And once and for all, we need to do something about it.
I think that it's beautiful words to close this episode. And for my Spanish speaking only audience, I will make a tremendous effort to try and relay the inspiring words that Chris has right now mentioned. I truly believe that it's about motivating you guys to understand that we're speaking about lifestyle. It's not only about you losing weight. It's about all the tremendous benefits. It's about your quality of life. It's about you needing less medications, because we need to be doing better in these things. And for those physicians that sometimes hear, oh, here's another guy speaking about keep. No. I'm just right now, I'm speaking with my population, with my insulin resistant, with my obese, and there might be other people that do not need to follow. We're not saying that you have to follow the ketogenic diet, low carb, if that, no. But there are tools that require to be explored, or they would benefit patients to explore these things when everything else at least has failed. I do not wait for everything to have failed. I always implement lifestyle modifications. And this is something that I think healthcare professionals will reach after they know the patient. You have to know the patient to motivate them properly. If you just are a medication giver, I don't think you're going to be able to motivate a patient adequately to be making those drastic lifestyle changes. But Chris, I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much for your time. I will make sure that I can make this episode and translate it. I usually make a summary of the whole episode for the people. You told me that your book, Brain Energy, is now in it's in Spanish as well. So
Yes.
Energía de Cerebro, or can you pronounce it? How would we use Spanish? Or they can look it up, I guess, or just put your name, Christopher Palmer. But I'm curious. I can look for it. Let's see. Brain Energy in Spanish, Spanish, and let me see. I don't know. I'll add the link in the bio or whatever you hear in YouTube, so you guys can find it, because I don't see it here. I mean, maybe I need
Let me see if I can find it. Cerebral Energia.
Energía cerebral, there it is. Ok, energía cerebral. Así es como lo tiene en el libro de Christopher Palmer, Energía cerebral. Ok, entonces, so that is fantastic. I mean, where can they find you? I mean, is it brainenergy.com, or do you have a place?
Yep. Breakenergy.com is probably the best place. We have a newsletter they can sign up for. It's free, like all sorts of things.
I would make the assumption that you don't do any, or do you do any telemedicine, any telehealth by any chance? No.
Sadly, no. I've been working on a possible clinic that may be open in the spring. So we may have a clinic open then. If people really want to sign up for a wait list, they can. That's on my another website, chrispalmermd.com.
Okay.
But yeah.
So there you have it. I mean, if for those that want to, I mean, the wait list is probably going to be horrible, but
It is, unfortunately.
yeah,
but
it's like I can guess minuses as well. Well, Chris, it was a true pleasure. I mean, if you want right now, I mean, after the recording here on Instagram, I'll put you as a collaborator there. I mean, this is just a preliminary. I'm gonna edit the sound and everything else, and then I will put it in the podcast. And as I said, if you need the material, or I can also send it to you or give you the link so you can do whatever you want with it.
that'd be great. Awesome.
Well, thank you once again for helping here the community, and I hope and I'm sure that your words will be a motivation for many to change their lifestyle. So
Thank you, Christian, for having me on.
alrighty, have a blessed day.
Right.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Nunca bajo el ego. Es en el dolor donde el crecimiento se esconde. La tormenta me forja, no importa por dónde. El doctor Asad me enseñó una lección. Que en la mente está el poder, la medicación. No solo el cuerpo, el alma también hay que entrenar. Porque si te olvidas en el caos vas a quedar. La vida no es fácil, eso es lo que vale. En los problemas está el oro que no sale. Crecer duele, pero es parte del proceso. El que se rompe más fuerte sale del exceso. No creces en calma, creces en la guerra. No creces en calma, creces en la guerra. Estirado tan fino que a veces ni me siento. Pero si no me cuido, el desgaste es el tormento. ¿Cómo puedo ayudar si yo mismo no respiro? Ser prioridad a veces es lo que más miro. No es egoísmo, es supervivencia. Para darle al mundo hay que tener presencia. Si mi mente está en paz, el resto fluye suave. Y cuando estoy completo, la energía no me cabe. La vida no es fácil, eso es lo que vale. En los problemas está el oro que no sale. Crecer duele, pero es parte del proceso. El que se rompe más fuerte sale del exceso. No creces en calma, creces en la guerra. No creces en calma, creces en la guerra. Es en el silencio donde encuentro el poder. La meditación me hace renacer. No se trata solo de lo físico que ves, sino de entrenar la mente, estar en tus pies. La vida no es fácil, eso es lo que vale. En los problemas está el oro que no sale. Crecer duele, pero es parte del proceso. El que se rompe más fuerte sale del exceso. No creces en calma, creces en la guerra. No creces en calma, creces en la guerra. Es en el silencio donde